Good evening, everyone, and welcome to some Friday night Figma. And we're going to talk about styles briefly this evening. Hope everyone's having a wonderful Friday and got some fun weekend plans ready to get in the mix. And let's see here, we'll go ahead and begin. So, as far as styles are concerned, well, what are styles? Styles are let's see here. Styles are saved properties that you could apply to any object, really. Styles can be saved colors, you can save strokes, you can save effects, and when you save these, it allows you to then quickly apply them to any object that you have, any layer that you have that you need to quickly apply a lot of different styles to. And this comes in handy almost all the time, depending on how large your project gets. You'll want to have a library of styles available so you can quickly, again, give style to whatever element that you're working with instead of having to input the same properties over and over and over. And even if you're relatively fast at applying the same properties over and over and over, the issue there is it becomes the more you have to work with, the more individual things you have to click and change the attributes of. That opens up a window for error. If you're working quick, or if you have to bang out a prototype in a certain amount of time and your back sort of against the wall, you don't want to risk mistyping a hex value, for example, or a font weight. And it'll be a lot easier if you have a library or a set of styles that you can quickly refer to, and you can just apply those and move on. And this falls under the category of don't repeat yourself, dry, DRY, as well as don't work smarter, not harder. And a good example that I came up with is, let's say, I'll just throw some ovals into the canvas right quick. Let's say that you have two ovals that you're working with, and the color of one, and we can just let's do 31 31 31 hex, and we have a color of 31 31 31 but an opacity of 90%. And so let's say that you are in the habit, as we sometimes do, of when you're choosing your fill color for a new object, such as, so I have two ovals, or I have two ellipses here, and each have a slightly different fill value associated with it. The one on the left has a fill value as a hex of 31, 31, 31, and an opacity of 100%. And the ellipse on the right has the same hex value, but it has an opacity of 90%. And now, just looking at this on the canvas, it's depending on your visual acuity, or how well you can see this, you can see that the ellipse on the right is slightly I'm sorry about that. The ellipse on the right is slightly easier to see, and as such, just looking at them on the canvas can make it different, or can make it difficult to determine which one is which. However, this comes into play in a much bigger way if we're used to using, clicking on the fill swatch to change the fill property based on what we have here down in the document colors. And now, when you're trying to choose, especially between multiple similar looking swatches, it can be very difficult to know which one is which, because when you come down here and start selecting your color, or go to choose your colors, we have the cursor changed to the eyedropper tool. However, it doesn't give us, there's no text overlay that tells us anything like what hex value this is, what opacity is. And so if you're quickly trying to apply let's say a fill color to something, and you didn't remember what order you put these fills in, and again, this is hex value of 31 31 31, opacity 100, and this ellipse on the right has the same hex value but an opacity at 90%, and these two are down here. If you didn't know which one was which, just quickly looking, you might accidentally apply the wrong fill color. And so, for example, in this pretend design, this rectangle, I want to give it the color 31, 31, 31 that has 100% opacity. But if I accidentally choose, if I accidentally choose this one when I mean to choose that one, then if I'm working quickly, I might not know that this actually has an opacity. The point of that little exercise there was to tell you that it's never really a good idea to rely on your document colors down here, especially when, as you can tell, for one, these colors moved around a bit since last time I had this window open, and so they don't stay in a fixed place, and so it's folly to try to rely on their location in this document colors area to know which one to pick. And secondly, when you're dealing with colors that are similar, like variations on a color, if you're developing your color palette, for example, you definitely you want to make sure that you're applying the right fill value, or for that matter, you want to make sure that you're applying the right property to your objects. And so that's where styles come into play. And so I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of all of those layers right there. And as far as styles are concerned, like I said at the beginning, we can have colors. We can make styles out of colors and stroke and effects and basically many things that will we'll use them over and over again for our different objects. And it's sort of like components in that way, in that it gives you, once you set it up, it's quickly you're able to quickly reuse them, and it's very reliable. They're not going to change each time, and you don't have to rely on yourself, especially if an object has many properties. You can rely on your library, your styles that you have set up to remain consistent throughout. And so this is you remain consistent, and you're able to work a bit faster, but in a smarter way than just, for example, as I just showed you, using the documents color area of the fill section here on the design panel. And so we can begin with color, and a good way or one of the ways to set up a style with color is to I typically I draw an ellipse, and I will find whatever color I'm working with. Now, I'm not going off a design document or anything. I'm just coming up with this as I speak, which is why it's a little rough, but that's the peril of live streaming. So I like this sort of orangish pink color right here, and let's say that I wanted to go ahead and have that color added to the color styles that I have for at least for this document at least. The process is sort of the same for adding it to your Teams library, but I will only be speaking in a local style context as far as this stream is concerned. And so if you were to open up another draft, or if you were to open up a new design file in a different team, you wouldn't have access to the styles that you create just in a draft. You would want to create a style library for the team, like a team library. But for a lot of the exercises we're doing, at least for many of the education tracks for boot camps, for example, you might not necessarily get to the point where you're creating an entire team library, and sometimes it's just document to document. And so that's the scope we'll be working with this evening. And so to begin, or to continue, I should say, we have the ellipse with the fill color. Again, I like this orangish pink, and here's the hex value. Here we're looking at the fill section, and if I tap this icon here, it says style. If I click that, then it brings up the color styles. And as you can see here, as I previously talked about, there are team libraries and sort of locally saved, and these colors are the ones I have set up from a previous project I was working on. And so as you can see here, I have I have my grays set up. I have my primary color, which is called Air Superiority Blue, and then I have my secondary color, which is Madder Lake. And so I have grays, blues, and reds. And whenever I was styling, or whenever I was dealing with laying down a bunch of objects onto the canvas and moving them around, the last thing I wanted to do was worry about making sure the hex value that I apply is consistent across the board. And so all I had to do was, instead of clicking the swatch or putting in the hex value each time and trying to remember, I don't know, like 11 or 12 different hex values, I just added them to my color styles library, and I was able to access them here. And so I created this document inside of this sort of team directory to show you what it looks like when you already have a bunch of styles created, and you could of course name them however you want to name them. I named them in this way. It may be more appropriate to name them like primary color or secondary color or whatever the case may be, because this worked okay for me because I'm a team of one when it came to working on my last project, and so this was appropriate for me. I knew when I was supposed to use these colors and when I was not supposed to use them. However, when you're working on with a team of people, you'll want to use more semantic naming, a naming convention that makes more sense to anyone. If you have someone who just joins the team and they start creating, and they need to create a button, for example, you'll want to have styles set up to where they won't have to ask someone what color do I apply to this button. Everything will be just named appropriately. And so the way we would, let me see if I can see here. Let's go to drafts, teams, new team project. Let me see if I can start a project under a different team without any styles already attached to it. Let's do this. Brilliant. Okay, so this is what it may look like for you instead when you aren't when you're not creating a document inside of a team. And so I'll go ahead and pick a color similar to the one I had before, something like that. It's off by a little bit on the hex, but that's not that big of a worry. And so we can see here, I click and there are no color styles. And so I'm working in a different team, and that team, I can turn on, of course, styles from the WeGo project, which is the name of the project that I was working on previously. And here we see those styles loaded into this document. However, I can click this toggle and turn them back off, which is what I'll do here, because we want to create some new styles. So I have this ellipse with the fill color that I like. I will click this icon to the left of the plus sign, and I suppose it's just sort of 4 dots is the icon. It's called style when you do a mouse over. So I'll click the style, and if I click this plus button right here, it says create style. So I will tap that, and then it wants me to add a name, or for this new color style it needs to have a name, of course. And so this could be, for example, our primary color. So I would call this well, not primary color. Color is sort of redundant. We know it's a color. I would call this primary, and I would create a style. And as you can see here, when I have this ellipse selected, and if you look in the design panel, right here, this section, this is where the fill area is, and it sort of gets replaced by whatever, it still refers to the fill. However, it gets replaced with just the name of the color style that I just established, which is called primary. And of course we can detach the style if we want to. That's sort of similar to detaching an instance from its sort of component parent. And if we detach it, it goes back to the regular fill area here, and we could then change it to whatever we wanted to. However, I will change that back to the primary color, just like that. And of course, having the same hex value, there's not going to be a change. And of course, let's see here. And you can, there's 2 different ways to view your little color styles modal here, or any sort of, stroke effects. And text also has its own style, and this is sort of where has its own style window that'll come up when you click on the little 4 dot style icon. This is the window that comes up, and you can change the way this is displayed by clicking the show as grid / show as list icon up here, and it may be helpful, especially if you're dealing with a lot of different styles, to have it show as a list, because it has a little picture, little swatch of what the color looks like, as well as the name. And having the name will, especially if you have someone on the team who possibly is new to the project, who doesn't know what each color is for and can't tell just by looking at the color style here in the library, you could it may be wisest to have list view enabled so you can see the name of it. And of course, if we wanted to make a change to this style, we wouldn't have to delete it and start all over. We can click this icon here, which is Edit Style, And then that brings up, this will be contextual for whatever sort of style you're dealing with. Stroke might look slightly different, effects will look different, and if you're dealing with a text style, this window right here will have different contextual properties that you can change. And of course, the first input field, the input field at the top, is the name, and so we have this named primary, which is reflected right here in the name. The description, you could type this would be useful if you have a very well fleshed out design, a design document or a style guide or what have you, a design system. A description of the color would go here, and that would be useful if you need to indicate what objects should have this color, what objects should not have this color, when to use it, when not to use it, so on and so forth. For all sorts of considerations you could put in the description area right here that would, again, help the team understand what this color is being used for. And of course, here's just a sort of a large picture of the color. And of course, if you wanted to change the color itself, you would click the swatch, or you could change the hex value right here, and you could choose a new color. And as you can see, as I'm moving the cursor around in the color picker area, it's changing the color here in the ellipse. However, I like that color, so we'll stick with that. And this is also where we could change the opacity and whether or not it's visible. And so we have many options here, and that is how you edit this specific color style. And so do bear in mind that, and this can be sort of counterintuitive in a way, I started with this object here, the ellipse, and I used it just as I needed an object, I needed a layer item to apply a fill style to. That does not mean, and that doesn't mean that the color style lives in, or is it, the color style is not dictated by this ellipse. And the best way to demonstrate that is I can just delete the layer. And that does not get rid of the color style. The color style lives in the team, it lives elsewhere. And so getting rid of any, you could have, this is a blank canvas at this point. There are no layers. However, when you have nothing selected, that is to say this layers panel can be full of layers, and I can still have nothing selected, your design panel on the right will list all of your styles that you have. And so we can see that the color style that I call primary, again, this sort of pinkish orange color, it persists, it lives on, even though the ellipse has left the building, has left the canvas, so to speak. And so, of course, we could make another ellipse, and if we wanted to, again, access the style that we have set up, depending on what we were working with, which in this case was fill, we would click these little 4-dot icon called style, and there's our style, click primary, and there it is. And so you could, for example, set up all of the different colors that you intend on using. And so for that one, we had primary, and let's say we want a secondary color. I kind of like that, actually. Yeah, something like that. Again, the process would be, we would click the 4-dot icon, which when you mouse over it says style. To add this style to our library of color styles, we would then click plus, and I'll call this secondary. And as we can see now, when I select nothing, we have 2 color styles, secondary and primary, and I can go ahead and add some more colors here. Let's say I wanted to tackle my grays, so we could go ahead and add some colors here. I'll just call that, call that dark gray. We'll call that mid gray, and of course, whatever your color system dictates, that's how you would name these, or your design system, I should say. And we'll go ahead and change that to just a little bit away from the default D9. We'll go with D0, so not at all that far away. And we'll call that light gray. And then I want sort of a white or an off-white, so I'll do FA, which is my favorite off-white. And I'll go ahead and add that as a color style. Let's see here, I'll just call that I call that background or base or something like that. Again, name these as would be appropriate for your team and your project. And then this is this is pretty cool. Let's say that part of my branding includes the use of a gradient. And so I could also have a gradient because a gradient is a type of fill. Of course, if you wanted to apply a gradient, you would click the swatch in the fill, and then up here in the top left, there's a drop-down arrow, and we have a couple of options available here. So solid is just a solid color. It is what it says on the tin. And then we have linear, radial, angular, and diamond. These are all these are four types of gradients. And then the last one is image, which is just, again, it's an image, and if you tap that, then you could choose an image that's stored, on your hard drive or on a server locally, or whatever the case may be. You could choose an image and apply it that way. However, we'll keep it easy and go linear, and let's say, and of course you can, if you want it to go at a certain angle, you can click and drag these sort of circular elements around. I'm not a huge fan of how little control Figma, just as an aside, I'm not a fan of how little control Figma gives you regarding creation of gradients. They could learn a lot from, or I guess the team would do well by studying, for example, how Illustrator and Photoshop, how they deal with their gradients. You have much more finer control over stops and starts, because, for example, you have your start and your stop, or your start and your stop, depending on which order you're reading this as, depending on which order you're reading it in. And if you wanted to add a new point in here, you would click above this area right here, and you could give that a new color, and you can see that these four squares are representative by what you see here. And if I drag this around, it's going to change sort of the mid portion of that gradient. However, and I could be completely incorrect about this, and if I am, someone please tell me, because I'm dying to know. If I wanted to, so I can click and drag this element, or this, I guess, slider, all the way to the left, and I know that that is 100% or 0%, depending on how you're reading this, as far as what point does the new gradient style begin. And I know that this is 0% or 100%. It's the opposite of whatever this one is. If I wanted to put this stop right in the middle, how do I know where that is? If I need it to be exactly 50% between this color and this color, there's no, it's not sticky at all. It doesn't like click right to the middle or to every 25%. And so it's a bit frustrating when you're trying to be very exact with your gradients. And yeah, sometimes I feel like I have to guess sometimes, and it gets even worse when you have multiple gradient stops going on, and you have something that you have something very precise that you want, and it can be sort of difficult to come up with or try to determine exactly where your stops are. And so you sort of have to just look really, you have to squint at the monitor and sort of guess where the stops are, and it's just very frustrating. And I'm sure there's I'm sure that's not, that's to say, I'm sure I'm just not getting something, but that's something I've not been able to figure out yet. But in any event, sorry for going on that tangent about gradients. We can also add a gradient as a style, and so let's say I wanted to make a gradient that looks something like that. Well, we could add that as a color style the same way we added all the rest of them to the left, and that we have this layer selected. We can click the 4 dots icon, which is style, and then click plus, and I'll just call this gradient, and create the style, and there we go. And of course, when we have nothing selected, it gives us our color styles over here on the left, and as we can see, all of our styles are visible here. And so if we wanted to use them, for example, if we had a rectangle that we wanted to apply our secondary color to, we would have our rectangle layer selected, and instead of trying to find exactly where that is using the swatch or goofing around with the document colors down here, we can simply, again, click the 4 dot icon, style, secondary, done, and there we go. And that's how we can quickly and reliably apply color styles to our various objects in Figma. So let's talk about the other styles that we have available. Well, text. Text is a big one. Excuse me. And we want to, just like with color, we want to be very consistent. with our text styles, and we want to reliably know that when we add a new text element or a new text object to whatever we're working with, that it falls in line with what we've established so far as our appropriate text styles. Text styles, not textiles. And to display or to demonstrate how that works, I'll go ahead and select my text tool, and I will start a new line of text here. And let's see here. I'm going to make this large enough to see. And let's see here, I'll call this headline or H1 headline 1 outfit regular 36. So I named it this way, or I wrote this string such that because when I, if I remember correctly, they might have updated this, but when I create a text style out of this, it's going to copy the text that's here, and it's going to suggest the name of that, and I will want to call, that's why I wrote this out, because I will want the text style to be called this, because it's very descriptive, and anyone who reads it will know what it's for. It's for headline 1, and or the most important headline, the largest headline. I have the name of the font here, which is outfit. I have the font weight, and this isn't the best way to do it, because regular doesn't really mean a whole lot. What is regular for one font, as far as the font weight is concerned, might have a different font weight value for another font. And so a better way of doing that would be specifying numerically what the font weight is. And then lastly, I have the font size, which is 36. And so if we just, again, as a quick aside, if we wanted to see what weight this was, because again, regular is not terribly useful, with this layer selected, we could go to inspect, and if we look at the typography section, we see that we have this is a weight of 400, and so sometimes regular means 300, or it could fall anywhere really. And so what might be better would be to call that like 400 and maybe 400 weight, 36 pixels for our, this would be a bit more semantic. Someone would be able to understand us at least a bit better than how it was displayed previously. And so this, I want to establish this text style as, or I want to save it as a style. And so just like how we did in fill, I'm going to make that my favorite dark color. Just as we did with fill, I will select the layer, and I will click the 4-dot icon right here, and click the plus. Okay, yeah. What it used to do was whatever the string of text was here, it would put it here, if I remember correctly. So I did copy it to my clipboard, and so I will name it H1 headline 1 outfit 400 weight 36 point, and so it'll be very clear what it does. Or how it's going to look. It doesn't necessarily say what it's for. Well, it does say headline 1. But if you wanted to add any additional information to this, for example, when it's used, or the use cases, or more information about it, you could bring up the textiles window here, the little textiles modal, by clicking the edit style icon, and you could write in a description, and you could write a description of when this is useful, when it's not used, like not for body text, headlines only, or something like that, to let everybody on the team know exactly what this was for. But as you can see here, just like with the color style, if you click the edit styles icon, you can bring up this little window, which is called edit style, and you can change the name of the style. You can give it a description. This is an example. I'm not sure where it gets rag123 from, but this is an example of what it's going to look like. And of course, you could change the style here. You could change it to any font you want. Just the line height and the font size, font weight, so on and so forth. And so, and of course, if you have many text objects that all have a single style, when you change that style, it's going to affect all of the other, it's going to affect every object that has that style applied to it, which is similar to how components work. If you think, if you think about the component creation and use process, if you create a component and then you start laying instances of that component throughout your design, and provided you don't detach them, of course. If you then decide that you want to make a change to the parent component and you change that, you'll notice that all of the instances, that is all, I guess, all the children of the parent component, they will all have that same change applied to them. And so it's a similar thing here in that if you edit the style in this scenario, every text object is going to, that has that style attached to it, is going to change according to the changes that you make. And so we can make several we can make several styles if we wanted to. For example, we could do headline 2. We could bring that down to like 3, and let's say I'm naming it what I'm going to do, and so I'm going to detach that instance, or I'm going to detach that style. Give it 30. Let's see here. I'm going to give it light. I'm not exactly sure what light is as far as weight. I sort of guessed. Light. Oh, light is a weight of 300. Okay, so that works out. And so let's see here. I want to save that. I think it's size 30. Yeah, there we go. And so, and you could, you could do this all the way down to H6 if you really wanted to. And then, of course, you can make one for your paragraph text or your body text, or whatever different, all the different text styles you anticipate using over and over again. You want to create a different style for each one of them. Just so, again, you can quickly, you can quickly apply it, not have to worry about, is it going to be consistent, and then just move on to the next thing you're working on. And so as you can see, when I have nothing selected, as you can see here in the layers panel to the left, no layer is selected. The design panel gives you, aside from the background fill color, it shows all the styles you're using. And so previously we just had color styles, but as you can see here, we have 2 different text styles available. Headline 1, or H1 and H2, which I have right here. And as I said earlier, just like with the colors, the text style does not live inside this text object. So I mean, I can delete both of those, and you can see that the text styles persist. You have to you have to go to links to actually, not links, but you have to purposefully delete the text styles to get rid of them. Same thing with the color styles. And so I could just control, or I could command A and get rid of everything, and of course all my styles persist. And so we can create some other styles as well. And so I will lay down another, well, we have enough ellipses. Let's use a rectangle. So I'll add the default rectangle, and let's say, for example, our design system calls for a specific stroke type, a specific stroke style. And so we, of course, at least the way my Figma set up, there is no default stroke applied when you put down the rectangle. And so I'll go ahead and click here to add a stroke. And let's say I want to add a stroke, the hex value 31, and let's say 4. And I want, see here, rounded joins, and I wanted a dash. Let's say, for example, that's the stroke style I wanted. And I guess we can make that on the center to make it look a little bit better. We would save that style just as we have saved the other styles so far. We would click the 4 dot icon, click the plus, and let's call that dashed center stroke. Again, name it whatever your team likes the best, or use the naming convention that's already in place. And so we have and then when I click off of that, when I have nothing selected, you'll see here in the design panel on the right, it adds it to the color styles, but it's at the very bottom, dashed center stroke. And so if we wanted to, I just added a new rectangle object to the canvas, have it selected, and click the little 4 dot icon here, give it the dashed stroke. Ah, it didn't save it appropriately. That's very interesting. Let's see here. I'm gonna get rid of that. Let me re-add that and see if I can see what's going on there. I'm going to call that center. Yeah. Give it a stroke of, let's say, not 10. That's ridiculous. 5. And give it that color there. Okay. I have the stroke set up the way I want it. And let's see here. Everything's visible. I'm going to call this one try again. Put down another rectangle, and let's see here. I want to give it the stroke style. Huh, that's interesting. I wonder why it's not saving it like that. I wonder if that's an issue with Figma. That's very interesting. Okay. And of course, if you wanted to get rid of any of your styles, you could just right-click on them, and that's how you get to edit or delete. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go in the properties of dashed center stroke. So I'll click the Edit Style button, and let's see here. Oh, that's interesting. It only has the properties. Can I add a property? Huh. I can add properties. Sorry, you and I are figuring this out together. That's interesting. It's treating it like it's a color. Let's see, I'll delete that. I'll start from nothing. And this is a stroke, to be sure. Yeah, something ridiculous like that that's very easy to see. And yeah, let's go ahead and try to add that again. It says it's a new color style. Create style. I have that stroke right there, and so I will create a new rectangle. Huh, that's very interesting. I did not know, again, the perils of live streaming. I did not know that would happen, and I'm following exactly the same steps that I am when I'm creating, for example, my text styles, which we know work, and then also the color styles. And so, that's interesting. In a way, I'm glad I did that on stream, so everyone could see that that happened at the same time, or that I wasn't making that up. Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, I'm curious as to why that's not working, but I do not want to get hung up on that. So we will get rid of that for now, and I will delete that style. And it's curious that it didn't add it as like a stroke style, and I'm wondering what's going on there. This is the most up-to-date version of Figma. Of course, it updates automatically, and I'm not doing it. Nothing. I don't. All the settings are out of the box settings, so nothing I'm doing should be overriding that style I'm putting forth there. So that's very interesting that happens. So let's move on. Again, I don't want to get too hung up on that. So let's see if we can. Fingers crossed on this, I suppose. Let's go ahead and make an effect style. And so we'll go with the default. We'll go with the drop shadow. However, there would almost be no point in creating a style for a drop shadow if we wanted to use the default properties. And so we'll give that an X offset of 8, Y offset of 8, blur of 12. And let's go ahead and give it something noticeable. So we can see if the error repeats itself. So I'll give it a red. Let's see here. I'll give it an extremely red drop shadow with an opacity of 75%. And so that's looking good. And of course, when I go to save this effect, it's saving the properties of the drop shadow, not the rectangle. So this drop shadow will be, if everything works out, the style will be applied to any object that I put onto the canvas. And so we'll click here, and we'll go ahead and add this style. I'll call this red drop shadows. Red drop shadow. We'll go ahead and create the style, and here it is. And we'll go ahead and create another rectangle to see if we can apply the let's make that maybe a different dimension. Actually, I'll tell you what, let's use a different shape entirely. Let's put down a polygon. There we go. And so let's see if we can give the drop shadow style that we've established to this polygon right here. And of course, we'll go to Effects. We'll click the 4-dot icon for style. Here is the style that we made, red drop shadow. Okay, well, thankfully that works. And so that's how we would apply our drop shadow style. And as you can see here, that's an effect style, so it's added here in the design panel. These are all our different styles. So of course we have text, color, and now we have effect styles. And I am still so confused. I guess I could leave those up. I'm still so confused why the stroke style is not behaving. It's the odd property out. So I'll go ahead and add another. I'm going to try this one more time to see what's happening here. And so I'll add a stroke, not the default stroke. Let's give it, yeah, we're using red so far. We'll go with red and make it a little bit bigger, something like that. Okay, looking fine so far. I won't edit it anymore. Let's see, make that 10. I won't edit it any more than that, add any additional properties to the stroke. And so I'll click here, and I want to add this as, I'll call this big red stroke. And it still says create new color style, even though it's clear that I feel like that should say create new stroke style. That's interesting. I'm sure it's something I'm not understanding. It's not Figma's fault, but we're learning at the same time. In any event, I'll create style. And okay, yeah, and it still adds it as a color style here on the design panel. Very curious. Okay, so I'll get rid of that, add a new ellipse, and I will add my stroke style, and there it is. It adds it as a stroke, but it's not. It's supposed to have a stroke of 10 pixels, and so it starts off with a stroke of 1, and so that's so bizarre. And so yeah, if it's not saving the size of the stroke, then it's I guess no wonder in a way that it's also not saving the other stroke parameters I'm giving it, such as stroke style of dash. It wasn't saving that either, and so I'm going to detach that. I'll delete the and I'll delete that. Let's re-add it. I know I'm doing this over and over, but it's just so interesting to see this in a repeatable way. I'll go ahead and add that. Let's call it stroke. I'm not going to create more than one. And yeah, under stroke it has this style attached. What if I choose primary? Okay. So it looks like it's saving it as a color style, and it's relying on you, the designer, to set for each object the size of the stroke, the location of the stroke, and then stroke style, dash, all this other stuff. And so it's relying on you to set that each time. It's just saving the color, which makes sense because it's under color styles. I got to say, Figma team, I disagree with that. I feel like that should save all the parameters that I give the stroke, like the stroke size, where it is, that is to say inside, center, outside, and like a join, rounded, all that good stuff. Huh, okay. That is interesting. Well, we learned that together, didn't we, team? And actually, that about does it for this evening. I'm trying to make shorter videos for these Twitch live streams. I'm working on another type of media that's not ready for distribution yet, or not ready for public consumption yet. And so I'm trying to make these a bit shorter so they're more digestible. I can remember when I talked about, a week or two ago, I talked about HTML and CSS, and I'm pretty sure I said this is a short one, and then it lasted 2.5 hours. So I'm trying to avoid doing that because I know, especially on Fridays, people's time is at a premium, and I don't want to take too much of that. And I'm glad we got to see how that I'm not comfortable calling it an error, but how stroke doesn't necessarily work like the rest of the styles. But in a way, again, like I said, I'm glad to have figured that out on camera because I was unaware that it would behave that way. I thought it was going to play ball like the rest of the styles. So. Again, that about does it for this evening. And of course, if you have any questions, any concerns, you know where to reach me. As far as the chat applications are concerned, you can also find me on LinkedIn, and of course, feel free to subscribe to me on Twitch and subscribe for notifications. You'll get an email alert whenever I go live, which, as it's turning out, is Tuesdays and Fridays at 7:30 Central Standard Time. And yeah, you'll have a good weekend, and I will catch you next week.